Okay, the process we've been describing so far, the pathway from sensation through transduction to perception, basically what we've been talking about is bottom-up processing, where we receive the sensory input from the environment, so we respond to the stimulus energies, the light, the sound waves, and so on. We respond to it, our sensory receptors pick up the signal, send the signal to the brain. The brain processes this information, and thus we have perception. So bottom-up processing essentially is starting with the stimuli and ending with the perception. Bottom-up processing, again, you're starting with the stimulus, the receptors pick up the information, and it works its way up. So, and that's why they call it bottom-up. It's working its way up to the brain. Well, you have here, for example, this stimulus here looks like a letter A. Well, how are we perceiving this as a letter A? Because really, what we are sensing is just a bunch of light reflected from the screen. So over here, you see here you have these three black lines and the white around it. That is what we are sensing. We put these together. The signal sent to our brain perceives this. Aha! That's the letter A. And this illustrates bottom-up processing. The letter A is really just a black blotch broken down into the features, and they say we then call it the letter A. So that represents bottom-up processing. On the other hand, what we haven't talked about yet is a process called top-down processing. And this realizes that the brain is not just waiting to receive signals from the body to telling us what we are seeing, hearing, smelling, feeling, and tasting. With top-down processing, our brain is actually initiating our readiness to essentially perceive what is in the environment around us. So in other words, our brain is already set up to receive, to essentially expect certain stimuli, and therefore it's starting from the top down. It's starting from the brain. So in other words, we have our own view of the world within us, and this influences how we interpret the information that we actually come across. And so essentially we are perceiving what we expect to perceive more often than we think. It's not simply that we are reading the stimuli as they are. We have set ourselves some expectations about what we are going to perceive, and this again illustrates top-down processing. So let's take a look at that letter A again. Well, what are we seeing here? We're seeing the cat. We immediately read this as the cat, but in reality, look at that H and look at that A. They are actually the same shape, but we are interpreting one as a letter H, one as a letter A based on what's around it, and we kind of do it instantaneously. Our brains are prepared to read simple sentences in English, and therefore we are prepared for what stimuli are presented before us. We're not just simply passively waiting for the stimuli to arrive. Furthermore, there is an interaction between the top-down and the bottom-up processing in putting it together into a unified information processing system where you are using both top-down and bottom-up all the time. In fact, you could think about it as like a feedback system. You know, we have expectations, which is top-down. Then we receive stimuli from the environment, that's bottom-up. We process the information. Then maybe we might expect the next thing. So it's top-down and bottom-up working together. You need to have both. You need to be able to actually respond to the stimuli that are actually there. So that's bottom-up, but you also need to be able to be prepared for what stimuli lie ahead of you. if you want to see a really good example of top-down processing, let's take a look at this paragraph. See if you can read it along with me. Only smart people can read this. Couldn't believe that I could actually understand what I was reading. The phenomenal power of the human mind, according to research at Cambridge University. It doesn't matter in what order the letters in a word are. The only important thing is that the first and last letter be in the right place. The rest can be a total mess, and you can still read it without a problem. This is because the human mind does not read every letter by itself, but the word as a whole. Amazing, huh? Yeah, and I always thought spelling was important. Now take a look at this and think about that for a moment. You don't read every letter at a time. If you were to read every letter, like with bottom-up processing, how long would it take you to read a book? It would take you forever. You'd have to be processing each and every letter, then putting the letters into words, and then the words into sentences. It will be a very, very slow, tedious task. But we kind of just process this information quickly because of our expectations. We are familiar with English. We recognize where words should be. We put it together without having to process every single little bit. If someone left out the dot on top of an I don't think we would notice if we were reading something. You know, these are things that we just kind of automatically can process without having to study each part. So therefore, again, we don't have to wait for the stimuli to arrive. Our brain prepares us for what it is we are going to be seeing, hearing, smelling, feeling, and tasting.